Welcome. Welcome to Poetry Flash in Berkeley, California. I'm Joyce Jenkins, and today we are delighted to present Daniel Wolff, author of More Poems About Money, and acclaimed poet and translator, Rosanna Warren. Books for this reading are available at bookshop.org/shop/poetryflash. The link is in the chat box. To the best of our tech ability, you were muted on entry. Please stay muted. This event is being recorded and will be posted on the Poetry Flash YouTube channel and Facebook page. At the end, when the program ends, unmute yourself and we'll keep the Zoom on so those who are with us live can ask a question or say hello. Visit poetryflash.org to check out our interviews, reviews, poems, and more, and to see news about upcoming events all over California. To receive emails about future Poetry Flash readings, join our mailing list at poetryflash.org. Now to begin. Rosanna Warren is an acclaimed poet, translator, and editor. Her recent collection is So Forth Poems. Here it is, actually. I don't know if you can see it, but there it is. Her recent collection is So Forth. Ilya Kaminsky says, "My heart was torn open and now it's all window," writes Rosanna Warren in this unforgettable, untamed, unrelenting book. It is gorgeous, it is generous, it is inimitable. John Kinsella says, "This is Rosanna Warren's testament to making life while resisting the insensitivities and brutalities of the day. It sees purpose in art, but especially in nature, and searches for a way to reconcile the two, where too often it seems obvious and easy to do so. It's not." Rosanna Warren's previous books include Earthworks, Selected Poems, Ghost in a Red Hat, a Boston Globe Best Poetry book, and Departure. Her literary criticism includes Fables of the Self, Studies in Lyric Poetry. Her recent biography is Max Jacob, A Life in Art and Letters. Her honors, her many honors, include awards from the Academy of American Poets, American Academy of Arts and Letters, and Guggenheim Foundation, among others. We are honored to have her with us today, zooming in from Chicago. Let's give a warm welcome to Rosanna Warren.
Thank you, Joyce. Thank you to Poetry Flash, and also thank you, Daniel Wolff. It's a joy and an honor to read with you and to hear you reading. I'll read just one poem from the book that Joyce mentioned, So Forth, and then mostly I'll be reading new work. Well, this is the first poem in So Forth. Cotillion Photo. These young women will last forever, posed like greyhounds, trapped in the silver crust of the frame. You can't tell one from another. The breed is so pure. They will never run, each one aloft on a frozen wave of white cotillion lace, to resemble marriage, to resemble fate. I remember July sun pouring down in a prickly meadow and a garter snake skin laid out like fairy lingerie on a stone wall. This was Connecticut. There would be a stone wall. Crickets were scraping the marrow from the day. I was young. I'd been alone for weeks. I painted the meadow morning and afternoon, trying to capture the crackling sound with my brush. I was reading Oedipus Rex. I understood neither the snakeskin nor the play. Your life is one long night, said Oedipus to the prophet. Oedipus, who saw nothing. Oak trees rustled in drought. In saffron grass, small creatures skittered. There came a day when I said to myself, I should prefer to sleep. Small planets tasted dry and bitter on my tongue. And 2 days later, I woke, alone in the creaking barn at dusk, not knowing what day, what month, what year, but feeling the hall of earth rolling on its way. It is not your fate that I should be your ruin, the prophet said. I moved my arms, my legs. I unclenched my hands and stood up dizzy from the cot. What was to come would come in its own good time, outside the frame. The moon was rising above the hill. A shy wind gathered force, and trees in their black silhouettes linked arms. At the beginning of COVID hitting us in March 2020, I retreated with my beloved to a very rough cabin in the Catskill Mountains. There's no hot running water. There are a lot of animals around. There's 40,000 acres of state forest right behind us. So we had snakes and bears, and you're going to hear and feel a lot of that in some of these poems. It also felt like the country was coming apart. Just after the election a day or two ago, it seems to be a little less coming apart, but I don't want to be foolishly optimistic. Anyway, so you're going to hear more despair and terror in these poems than perhaps I feel today. Inscription, and the roots of the fallen oak tree rear in flamboyant Gothic lozenges, earth sogged from days of rain, so ghost pipes spring up, crooking their croziers, spectral parasites. I borrow from them all. Sometimes I think I'm a plant, pale and myco-heterotrophic. This is a novel about time, the learned author declared. Yes, the book of life, whose pages turn slowly yet so swiftly in this diseased, reclusive year, damp sheets of shale underfoot, and the shuddering silver flash of beech leaves above. Hardly has the snow melted than the catalpa's white torches extinguish and summer starts sliding into its oubliette. As the black bear glides so suddenly into the meadow, we never hear his approach. In a blink, he's here, all presence, a silhouette, tall on his hind legs, smacking apples from the lower boughs. When he turns, he shows his Roman snout, his prophetic brow, his thoughtful, considering eyes. Like a shadow, he springs up the trunk, almost invisible in the shivering green. He's there, chomping wild apples. It's his season. It's their season. Let me give away what I fear. Other solstices will roll around. In childhood, I slept in a high room fringed by dark-sleeved spruces, a tree house in which I learned a grammar of shadows. That house is gone. The towering spruces are cut. I hear the bear munching, the branches shake. It's hard to distinguish his blackness from the tree's own inward night. And that larger night I shall be, oh yes, getting to know. I don't know if you've ever been personally acquainted with bears at close range, but they're amazingly agile. You wouldn't think that such a large stumpy animal could glide and spring, but they do. They're like water the way they move. Okay, this poem, Dead Flowers, has the title from a Rolling Stones song. Dead Flowers. If you hurt yourself before someone else hurts you, is that homeopathic? Watch me prick poison into my skin, sign my name in pain. Watch me miss the appointment, cancel the call. Watch me gulp smoke and receive a certificate of enlightenment between the smeared egg yolk horizon to the west and the bone-white eastern sky. The emperor appoints me to the poetry bureau, and I declare myself queen of the underground. On the back road, the turkey vulture plucked the guts from the squashed squirrel, then flapped up to the dead branch of the shagbark hickory to examine us, examining the carcass. Oh, sacerdotal bird, with your crimson scalp and glossy vestments, teach us to translate the spasm, the cry, the disintegrating flesh, the regret. What can be made of all this grief over the butter yellow, humming, feather-grassed midday meadow? Skim the shadows of vultures, ghostly 6-foot wingspan, V, swiftest signature, turning death into speed. Here's one of those snakes I promised you. We have a lot of them there, and I'm deathly terrified of snakes, but they get into the house, so they get into the poems. Small, dead snake. As when I approached what I feared and didn't want to see, the small rat snake curled where it died, struggling in the glue trap set for mice. And I cried out and twisted my hands, but returned to take up the trap with gloved fingers, tipped it into a plastic bag and carried it to the woods on a shovel, and dug a hole in dense root-woven earth, buried it, then looked up where tall leafy branches of beech and oak carded strands of cloud. So I tried to ease with both hands gently out of my chest my fears for you, my stories about what I feared for you, and tried to lift the stories free, to place them out of sight, beyond the grasp of my belief, beyond horror, but not beyond knowing what traps I had set for you, for me. And this is, let's see, even more recent, meditating about our country in January 2022 on a train from, I go back and forth between New York and Chicago, and because I detest flying, I often take the train. I love the overnight train. And those of you who know the Hudson River, it's got a wonderful geology to it, which enters the poem slightly. And it's sometimes geologists call the Hudson a drowned river. It was formed, long ago by the continent wrenching itself apart. A new year. Was it myself I left behind? Or was the country letting go of itself at each clackety-clack as the train rattled northward into dusk? Girders flashed by, the ghosts of factories, Then frozen fields, their stubble narrowly laid out in an ancient, foreign, indecipherable script. New solitudes flared on the smutty pane, as if I were aging faster than the engine's hurtle, while the Hudson shoved its massive wrinkled drowse south, dreaming at its own pace, the drowned river carrying thousands of years of sediment through torn uterus of rock. Angry signs slashed the shadows, wrecked cars stacked in yards, tilting fences, sheds pledged revenge. Then a whoosh of snow tattered the trees, and night swallowed us whole, till dawn, jerking me from my berth, broke over Indiana's frost-bitten furrows, a country graveyard slotted among farms. And here's a very different scene, a scene from childhood. The mud hole. You may not hear this, and I, in a sense, I wouldn't almost want you to, but it is a sonnet. I like to try sometimes to hide traditional forms. They're there as an understructure, but I don't like them to fly their flag. The mud hole. The mud hole, we called it, the small dark pond at the foot of the hill, Earth's eye, omphalos, secret, canopied by maples, fringed with brambles, but I knew how to pass where grown-ups would never find me, perched in the boughs of the scaly-barked ancestor tree. A leaf sprite flecked in shadows, I watched the frog rock shoot out its tongue to snag a fly. The water snake slip through pickerel weed and swivel in cursive across the murk. The turtle blink and bask, lost, long gone. I climbed carefully down into the future, learned to speak human, but still carry within me the iodine bottle's potion of pond water, amber, foul, far too potent to drink. This poem, Kali Yuga, is the Sanskrit title. Kali Yuga is, for those of you who know the Mahabharata, it's the degenerate age that follows the golden age, the silver age, and what in Western classics we would call the golden age, the silver age. So Kali Yuga is the desperate age in the Mahabharata. Kali Yuga. The summer of my smashed vertebrae, the summer of love, the vegan cafes and hippie boutiques of Woodstock still trying to smoke the weed of 1968 in 2022 as the virus braids its way in our cells and Russian missiles blast Ukrainian hospitals into ash. I tap with my cane along our rutted North American road, past massive oaks, maples, catalpa, shagbark, hickory still massively green, defying drought, massively quiet, despite gunshot fireworks echoing coast to coast. The summer obituaries pile up like unread mail. Paper to burn, more smoke. I tighten the Velcro belt of the hospital brace to keep my spine aligned. I brace myself. Kali Yuga, Hindus say. In the Mahabharata, the worst age, the age of Kali, the demon, cataclysm, sin, darkness, ignorance. How can we find words beyond our words? Could the planet burn. You lean to kiss me because it hurts me to turn. I remember my back smacking the floor in galaxies of pain. The summer of bones knitting their cells across the break. In Woodstock in the village square, the guitarist yowled, amplified only to himself, but the tinny sound rebounded decades down the Erzat street. Summer of ashes, explosions, fumbled words of kale and tofu, faraway buildings, far away, tumbling down. The demon Kali, over the bodies, somewhere, summer of someone's love. Let's see. Yeah, John Kinsella did notice that I write a lot about nature, and I do. And it's not a theory, it's just that I feel that we're animals and that we live in, that we breathe oxygen and etc. Here's a poem by a very much a Northeasterner traveling in the West in the Rocky Mountains and being amazed. In a strange land, not our mountains. Beyond the Chevy junked in weeds rise snaggletooth peaks dimly visible through smoke. Did we think the landscape would hold still for us? Sagebrush, lupin, yellow balsam root, and those small purple trumpets of sticky geraniums. 5-petaled arnica heals bleeding wounds. This is grizzly country. Use common sense, advises the guide. And what about those thunderheads rearing up in a celestial Taj Mahal? Aspens quiver with DTs. Alders swish in a corps de ballet. But one whole mountainside is dying a brown death, a bark beetle fest. We came a long way to keep our balance on this rocky ledge, to stump along the trail trying not to look a bighorn sheep in the eye. For ages, we've been learning to hold hands, but now I hold 3.5 billion years in my palm, a chunk of fossil cyanobacteria, the cell that first churned out oxygen and made our air. You disappear behind a crag. Each serviceberry leaf, a scarlet flame, a fresh struck match. Ashes waft across from Idaho. The Pacific stuck out its foot and kicked these mountains buckling up into the clouds, where now the cirque in its incisors clamps the grimy, ragged tablecloth that used to be a glacier. Tourists since the womb, we cling to our estrangement, gaping as the mountain maw gags and spits one more scrap of ice, thundering into the lake, a bowl of emerald bile. Let's see, just about done here. I think I'll just read one more. This is also a travel poem of before COVID, visiting Japan for the first time in my life. And it is full of, well, you'll recognize some sort of Buddhist language and temptations here. A Heart Sutra. If we dragged our suitcases through Shibuya Station, bewildered by its 100 exits and competing rail lines, and then shoved our way, following Dharma through crowds to hesitate, at traffic starfishing in 10 directions at Shibuya Crossing, it was not that we were looking for gods, nor did the 44-story neon strobe flashes strike one spark of divinity. I set off on my harebrained trek the next day, alone, pursuing the Four Noble Truths on 2 successively intricate subways, to debouch into a long, gray, shabby, graceless street. Form is emptiness. Emptiness is form. But not here, where I veered down an alley and stumbled into a grove of temples and shrines. Stone stairs invited ascent. A huge bronze bell told the hours in Edo. Demons kept watch and preserved that time. Realm of desire. Kimonos flowed by. A scarlet pagoda soared, protected by gods of thunder and wind, and a cumulonimbus of incense. At the side booths, 100 yen, procure your fortune on a tiny baton. Success in business, love, fertility, or school exams. How many reincarnated lives would suffice for all the rice crackers, candies, trinkets, straw sandals, and bean paste buns for sale in these stalls, while off to the side among pines, the Buddhas of mercy and wisdom hugely brood. They exclude nothing. Down the street, 1 step past the market, through a gate, in a hidden garden, suddenly quiet, a fountain drips through evergreen shade, where each alone, a man and a woman, bend their heads. I've flown halfway around the globe to discover the word no. No eye, no ear, no nose, no tongue, no mind. And if no desire, then no suffering, nor end to desire. But instead, back on the street, I sink my teeth in a sticky, squirting, reddish bean paste bun and taste someone's God, if not my own. Thank you very much.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for that beautiful reading. Yes, that was really lovely. Wow. Love the new poems. Really wonderful. Okay, now, Daniel Wolff. Here's his, I don't know if you can see it. This is his amazing book. It's amazing cover. More Poems About Money with Fallen Angels. So it looks like fallen angels. Just perfectly appropriate for a discussion about money. Daniel Wolff's new collection, of course, is More Poems About Money. And it's an amazing book of poetry with a direct and powerful perspective. I don't think I've seen anything like it. Maybe just a few poems by poets over the years, a few I can think of on this subject, but very few. Few have taken on our society's monetary system as a subject, though it is unavoidable in our lives. He brings together not only our daily urban lives, but nature too, sometimes with his own brand of rough and tumble spirituality. New York poet and impresario Bob Holman says, from dives into economic theories to exploring real-life contradictions like Cuba's dual monetary system, Wolff advocates always for poetry, which surely exists only as a gift economy. In his biography, in his own biography, Daniel Wolff says, he has made appearances in many literary magazines, been anthologized, collaborated with dancers, sculptors, and printmakers, mailed fictitious letter poems, done performance pieces, printed broadsides, tacked poems up illegally in subway cars, and installed them in peep shows. He's read across the country as well as on air. His poetry collections include The Names of Birds, Work Sonnets, and The Real World. He's also the author of award-winning nonfiction. As he says, his non-poet books include How Lincoln Learned to Read, The Fight for Home, How Parts of New Orleans Came Back, and Grown Up Anger, The Connected Mysteries of Bob Dylan, Woody Guthrie, and the Calumet Massacre of 1913. And I'm just absolutely delighted to have both of these poets here today. But Daniel, I'm really looking forward to hearing you read. Please give a warm jazz hands welcome to Daniel Wolff.
Thank you very much. Joyce, it's very good of you to do this. What a pleasure. Rosanna, it's above and beyond. You're a very tough act to follow. I feel like we all should get up and run twice around the block and then maybe, but those poems sounded beautiful. I am going to read from more poems about money and yak about it a little bit. So I don't forget, I'm reading in person in the Bay Area coming up on December 1st, which is a Thursday, at Bird and Beckett, which is 653 Chenery Street, and that's from 7 to 9 p.m. And then the next Monday, December 5th, at Oakland Yard, which is 420 40th Street in Oakland, suite number 2, from 6 to 7. You won't remember that. You probably won't be in the Bay Area, but I had to say it because I'm going to be there. So more poems about money was it struck me as Joyce said, as a kind of forbidden topic. Poetry isn't supposed to be about money. Poetry is high art, maybe at its best, and money is what we grovel for. So the beginning of the book is a little epilogue that explains why you can't write this book. And it goes like this: there can't be more poems about money because there haven't been any. Nothing deep or funny about a penny. It isn't even real. What people lose sleep over, fight to collect, hoard, squander, steal, is a promise. Inspect the coin more closely. It has no value, only stands for value. Gold, we're mostly told. What the teller hands over, the unpoetic teller, is a symbol, legal, tender. So then I don't take my advice and go ahead and write the book anyway. Because it seems to me that money is one of those things that both holds us together and pulls us apart, and is important enough for poetry to pay a little attention to it. And so I try to figure out what it is and what this system is we're in the middle of. The book's divided into sections. I'm going to read you one if I have the time. I might not get through it. But it begins with boom, when all things are going well. And then it goes to the section I'm going to read to you, which is called bust, when all things don't go well. And then there's a section called aftermath. And then I look at alternatives to the system we're in. And then there's an ending called exchange, which tries to sum it all up. So I'm going to do bust, which, my theory here was we don't really understand economy or money very well, but in fact, maybe there's some clues to how it works when it breaks down. So I start, I took some hope that poetry could be written about money from the language that economists use. For example, a lot of these poems were begun in 2007 or 8, and I was told we were in an inflationary bubble. Now, if that isn't an excuse for a poem, I don't know what one is, to be living in an inflationary bubble. So this first poem is called Inflation. And a bunch of these I'll explain to you, but they begin with quotes from the newspaper, because that's where we turn to understand this stuff. And this quote is, "Today's rising housing prices, the biggest bubble in history. And how nice it is to live inside. Like angels lifted o'er the fray. The angles of our wings slightly off perhaps, but we flap and happily, the light and air piped in. If heaven proves a sticky trap, who are we to care? Our home's a cloud, our food delivered. What fluctuations mar the mood, but shimmers that we ride, inflations." So there we are in our economic paradise, kind of riding this bubble. And I thought, now what is the fuel? How does this work? What does the system run on? And the poem that followed is called Credit, with the subtitle Desire. And again, it starts with a newspaper quote. "The market runs on credit, which romantics called yearning, a flame, or a sonnet, the perpetual burning of what we are to manufacture what we want. We borrow on a future that stays each day tomorrow." You follow? We all do. The fuel, fanned by beauty, just enough beyond our reach to teach how cruel love can be. Except it isn't love, or poetry, or fire. It's desire. The market runs on desire, which is a horrible idea to me in part, but I think may be true. The economy runs on what we desire, on what we want. And then, Rosanna and I talked about this earlier. She introduced me at a reading in Chicago, did a great job. And she said she said with a little unbelief in her voice, there's a sort of theory to this book. There's a sort of logic. And I said, yes, it's okay. But there is. These kind of progress these poems in an order. So after thinking, okay, the economy runs on what we want, on our desire, on credit. We borrow to get what we want. Then there start to be disturbing clues that maybe things aren't going great. You can see them in today's paper if you want to look. We've had the inflation, our bubble, and now there start to be noises. So I quoted some of those noises again from the newspaper. I don't remember which newspaper, but the noises are systemic risk, derivatives, dark markets. These whispers on the far horizon ripple through our solid credit. It seems the very air we lean on leaves. Along the bubble's sown seam, a sighing. Is risk what we've been flying on? The trouble is, when truth starts lying, all the rest is derivation. What we thought to save is spent. And now, the long inflation failing, we eye the veil. It's rent. The boom becomes the hiss of trust escaping. And then the bust. Unlike Rosanna's, these sonnets aren't disguised very well. I thought it was kind of fun for it all to clank along and rhyme. some. So a lot of these have been sonnets. Let me do that one once more, because I think it goes by fast. Dark markets. Systemic risk, derivatives, dark markets. These whispers on the far horizon ripple through our solid credit. It seems the very air we lean on leaves. Along the bubbles sown seem a sign. Is risk what we've been flying on? The trouble is, when truth starts lying, all the rest is derivation. What we thought to save is spent. Now, the long inflation failing, we eye the veil. It's rent. The boom becomes the hiss of trust escaping, and then the bust. So it's hard doing Zooms, because I was saying to Joyce at the beginning, I'm used to being interrupted. I'm used to people going, I don't get that, or, explain it, which I can never do very well. But I'll assume you guys are all out there complaining about this or clapping or doing something. So the next poem is not taken from the newspaper, but is a guy talking. It occurred to me when I started thinking about the system not working, the depression, the recession, whatever it is, that a lot of, like our belief that a penny is worth something, a lot of the economy is based on faith. We assume it's sort of going to work, and if we give somebody this, we'll get that, and it's trust. So this is a poem called Loans and Trust, again in another guy's voice. We're caught in a system that doesn't work, and we can't afford to let it fail. The words of a man on his way to work. His job is inventing real estate deals, which fail, he says, more often than not. The work depends on loans and trust. Loans and trust are known to fail. But for me to even get up for work, I gotta believe the next won't fail. Then, as the connected cars of his train work their way underground, he adds that his marriage is about to fail. It has really, already has. We're trying to make it work for the kids, but that can only last so long. Every morning we fail. He looks out through the blackened windows. It doesn't work, he says again, and we can't afford to let it fail. So then the newspapers start headlining the problem, and I start using headlines. It's no longer a hint that maybe something's wrong. Something's wrong. And this poem is called Unemployment Rate. And the first headline is GM cuts 10,000 jobs. And adjustment merely of the market's knobs. Unemployment at 8.3. Nothing to see here, folks. Keep moving. Down Route 59, a big plywood sign, Yabu fence. And under it, a thick, tense man with nothing to do. His whole crew laid off. I never knew it could be like this. Numbers, I guess, don't lie. Until they do. How best calculate current jobless rate? Go by. Go by. And that last line is go by, BY. Nothing to see here, folks. And go by, go BUY. That poem started with a guy who I knew already, who had been laid off and was just befuddled by it. He couldn't, there's a sense, and it'll come up again in these poems, that the system is so much larger than we are, that when it goes up or goes down, it's just like, riding a wave. You have no idea what's going on. And he'd lost his job and was kind of standing around in a deli when I bought my morning paper. So then and this is about to happen, supposedly. We entered a recession. And this poem is called Recession, subtitle Cul-de-sac. And there's a very, precise definition of what a recession is. But it mostly means that there are an awful lot of guys, like the guy I just described, standing around going, what happened? Suddenly we don't have it. So recession, cul-de-sac. It's not that nothing's left. Take a right up the cul-de-sac and stop at the McMansion. It's empty. Listen. Bees boring perfect holes in the back of new laid planks. Listen. The granite steps are stone deaf. We built too big, too late, and now we have to deal. Kneel. Give thanks. This is our estate, real. Again, I live in the suburbs, and it all gets built and everything looks fine, and suddenly you notice that there's only one house on the cul-de-sac and there's nobody in it. You go, what's going on here? So the next poem is called The Financial News. And it's taken from the papers of 2007, 2008, headlines, when the thing everybody's been warning about happens. Let me pause 1 second, because it occurs to me, I did this the other night. I did some of these poems with Bill Irwin, the clown and actor, was great. I read some of these and he's soft-shoed behind me. And he said, I'm willing to do this because we're both children of depression parents. And both of us have a link because we were brought up feeling like this will all go away. This is make-believe. Our parents had been so affected and scared by a depression that we always thought it would happen again. I still think it'll happen again. But when this happened in 2007-8, what these poems are about, I talked to my father, who was 90-something at the time, and I said, it's finally happened. What you kept telling me was going to happen all the time, it's happened. Aren't you worried? He said, nah, don't worry about it. We'll be okay. I thought, why have I been fretting about this for decades? But there you go. So this is when it does happen, the financial news. GM collapses. Details to follow. Except newspapers disappear. Contemporary synapses demand speed, ear to ear. Down the road, a couple divorces. Polar ice cap melts. Did trapping beaver for beaver pelts open the way for invading forces? Peace, we forget, is just more of the same. Rational vision of market to blame. Yet those who believe the system random tend to be absent when profits are taken. Trust funds turn up empty, which leaves a silence, which fills with history. That I'm going to do that one again because it's a little complicated for me. It might not be for you, but it's also trying to get at the history of this, whether it was the 1930s depression or the Dutch trapping beaver so that suddenly there was some place called New York City. There is some sort of pattern here. And with our synapses going so fast, we do or don't spot it. The financial news. GM collapses. Details to follow. Except newspapers disappear. Contemporary synapses demand speed, ear to ear. Down the road, a couple divorces. Polar ice cap melts. Did trapping beaver for beaver pelts open the way for invading forces? peace, we forget, is just more of the same. Rational vision of market to blame. Yet those who believe the system random tend to be absent when profits are taken. Trust funds turn up empty, which leaves a silence, which fills with history. So these are 3 short poems that go after that, that are all called economic cycles, economic cycles, economic cycles, 2 economic cycles, 3. One of the things that economists do, and not just economists, but the guy at the bus stop, is they say, yeah, I've seen this all before. Here's the pattern. We understand this. You know, it all keeps coming around. It's still the same thing. And I thought that was interesting, among other things, because then we maybe ought to be able to stop it happening, but apparently not. So one of the things that we were advised and are advised when there's economic trouble is to have confidence in the system. Always been a strange piece of advice to me. Why would we? But there was a headline that went, the answer? Consumer confidence. The more we believe, the more we buy. Hope floats the marketplace until it doesn't. A cycle as commonplace as flood and drought. Don't worry about the answer, consumer. Confidence is all you need. And that's an order. Economic cycles 2. Piece of advice from the newspaper. Market shaky, print more money. Market shaky, print more money. Let us make more lettuce. Let us scatter seed. Let us till the sunny soil till brimming harvest brings what? Another loan. A Ford we can't afford. A flat TV. Home. Extend, we're told, the extension cord. And when there's no more left to spend, confess, consumer, it mustn't end. Worthless. We're still worth our weight in what? Want. Shop till you drop that tiny seed. There can be no final stop. And in economic cycles 3, one of the advices that happens when the stock market crashes or everybody gets laid off or GM collapses is nothing to worry about. The market has to find its bottom. This is a phrase that is as good as living in an inflationary bubble, as far as I'm concerned. I like the idea that the market is a sentient thing and that what it can do with its senses is find its bottom. So economic cycles 3, the market needs to find its bottom. Falling through ever darker layers, losing light, shedding investors, to the last least loan has been cast off, rotten. Headlong, flaming from the ethereal sky, all desires are reduced to one. How overcome this dire calamity? By striking land or ash. The market hasn't technically crashed and can't bounce back, can't start up again, can't float its bargain bonds again till it's found bottom. Our paradise lost, a hole in the ground. I will read that one again. Joyce is right. This is Doré, the cover, from Milton's Paradise Lost, the angels being cast from heaven, which this poem in particular not only refers to, but quotes some Milton, how overcome this dire calamity. and headlong flaming from the ethereal sky is not Daniel Wolff, but John Milton. So let me do that one again once. And then I've only got one more. The market needs to find its bottom, falling through ever darker layers, losing light, shedding investors, till the last least loan has been cast off, rotten, headlong flaming from the ethereal sky. All desires are reduced to one: how overcome this dire calamity? By striking land or ash. The market hasn't technically crashed, and it can't bounce back, can't start up again, can't float its bargain bonds again till it's found bottom. Our paradise lost, a hole in the ground. And finally, we get to the end of Bust, and there's a poem called Depression, a working definition. And this is again in somebody else's voice. Excuse me, I picture this person at the kitchen table trying to explain not even what went wrong, but how much has gone wrong. So it's in his or her voice. Oh, before I start, again, there's a phrase that inspired this, which is, if you remember during the real estate troubles of 2007, 2008, when people got in real trouble, they were said to have gone underwater. Oh, that house has gone underwater. And I find that irresistible as a writer. So here's this guy talking, or this gal talking at the table. We aren't underwater, not yet, but I can feel the tide rising and see our stuff slowly sliding away. The rug is wet. The dining room set is overdue. You stare at me across the table like I should do something. I do what I'm able to. But I can already tell tomorrow's work won't ever be enough. You say something about love. I don't think you know how badly we've been hurt. Here's our home. Here's the hole it's in. And here's the line where the ocean begins. Thanks very much.
Thank you. Thank you. Wow. This has been a wonderful, wonderful reading. Rosanna Warren, Daniel Wolff. I can't thank you enough. You can find their wonderful books at bookshop.org/shop/poetryflash. Part of the proceeds will go to continuing this series, and you won't be funding Jeff Bezos' space program. So it's a very good thing. bookshop.org/shop/poetryflash. And the in-person readings that Daniel mentioned, we'll make sure that those get in the Poetry Flash calendar, the details, so that you can look them up in the next few days. They should be there. And in case you want to meet them live and you're in the Bay Area. And Rosanna Warren from beaming in from Chicago, thank you again. Just so wonderful. Such a pleasure to hear you, to be able to immerse myself in your work, and just such a pleasure. So thank you for joining us. Thanks to Rosalinda, our tech support, and thank every person who logged on. And check out poetryflash.org for future events, some of them in person. So thanks. We can end the recording.